Hello there, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. It's been a little bit. We appreciate you all tuning back in to the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. Welcome to 2020, the new year. Hope you all had a great holiday season. I'm joined by both Matt Ray and Brandon Martin of VR2. And guys, we have a ton to cover in this podcast. Ben McKee and I are staff writer here at RTI. He and I did a podcast earlier, the RTI podcast, and talked about some of the big stuff with Cade Mays and Trey Smith and everything. But I want to go a little more in depth with you guys on that and a few other things as well. Big news that came out of Wednesday for Tennessee. Well, there are several things that happened for Tennessee today. As we're recording this, it's Wednesday night. But I think the biggest one that's taken all the headlines and stuff now is that not only is former five-star Knoxville Catholic lineman Cade Mays transferring from Georgia, but all indications are pointing to Cade Mays transferring from Georgia to Tennessee. And guys, there's a lot of talk about whether or not is he going to be able to get immediately eligible, assuming that he does come to Tennessee. And then, lo and behold, just not even an hour, I guess maybe it was maybe an hour, but essentially within the hour of that announcement happening, you had one of the Rivals reporters for UGAsports.com reporting that the Mays family is suing UGA and a chair manufacturing company after Kevin Mays, who's Cooper and Cade's dad and also a former Tennessee lineman, had his pinky had to be amputated after an incident at a UGA athletic event. Guys, we're talking in the group chat, and Brandon, I think, said this is approaching 2017 coaching search levels of crazy. I have not seen anything like this happen where you've had a player. Well, transfer makes sense, but a player transfer and then shortly after he transfers comes out that his family is suing the university he's transferring from. This is bizarre beyond belief to me, but we can talk about that too. But Matt and Brandon, I want to let you all get in here on this too. This is huge news for Tennessee, especially coming on the heels of potentially being able to keep Trey Smith. He's making his announcement on Thursday at 1 o'clock, but even if he does go to the NFL, getting Cade Mays in that is huge for Tennessee. If he comes and he's on the roster and Trey Smith stays, Tennessee's offensive line next year will have 4 former 5-stars starting for them, barring injury on the offensive line, and the one non-5-star was a top 250 overall player and 4-star in Brandon Kennedy, who was arguably, him and Trey Smith, you can go back and forth on which guy was your best lineman for Tennessee this year. This is huge news for Tennessee, potentially and looking like going to land Cade Mays.
The fact that they're going to pull Cade Mays, first of all, that right there, you can stop me on anything else. That's a huge deal. You're talking about a guy who has started 11 games for Georgia this year. He came in off the bench. He can play all 5 positions on the line. He's a quality player at all 5 positions on the line. I think a lot of folks feel like he probably never should have had to go to Georgia in the first place. And it kind of feels like that being corrected. But then the stuff with his dad comes out. So when this first this is how fast all of this broke. It breaks that he's going in the transfer portal, and so I take my lunch and start trying to get a piece together on Cade transferring. Mm-hmm. By the time I get that done, it's starting to rumble out that it sounds like he's coming to Tennessee, and then he is coming to Tennessee. And by the time we get that adjusted and get that released, then we start hearing all this stuff about the lawsuit. I think worst case scenario for Tennessee, Cade Mays he just finished his sophomore season at Georgia. He's coming in. He's still got a redshirt season available, so if he has to sit a year, you can redshirt him, then have him for 2 seasons. But with his family having an open lawsuit against the school that he's leaving from, and he saying that he feels like he's been treated differently since that happened, it's not just that he's coming to Tennessee, but that's about as strong a case to get an immediate waiver as anybody I've ever heard.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree with basically everything Brandon said. You have to think that with the open lawsuit that gives Tennessee the upper hand to get him immediately eligible. Sam Pittman's departure obviously probably played a big factor in him, deciding to leave. You constantly hear and will continue to hear until the day that Sam Pittman is not coaching football anymore, that he's a father figure to recruits. Anytime there's a commitment to Georgia at the time from one of these big-time offensive linemen, and this is kind of where you get in a situation. I know a lot of you guys ask questions about this all the time. Well, why are they recruiting him with these two guys, or why is this guy not on him? Well, Pittman handled pretty much all of the offensive line recruiting at Georgia on his own. Now, to his credit, that's because he was so good at it. He was like a father figure to these guys. They really enjoyed him. They really enjoyed being around him. But when something goes wrong and in the coaching world, or he leaves, then that puts kids in a bad position. So that had to play a big part in Cade. But like Brandon said, the Mays family opens a lawsuit. That does open a kid up to get treated differently, and if that does happen, well, then the father figure that he once committed to is now gone. There's just so many things that go into this. The comfort level that he had from leaving home to go to Athens is gone. The hospitality at Athens is no longer there, and he's the black sheep of the team now, I guess you can say. And then everything else going on. I think Tennessee's got a great chance to get him eligible. If the case is handled properly and legally, I think you'll probably see Cade Mays on the field next year. Now, on the field, what does that mean for Tennessee? It means a lot. I mean, we were talking about a guy, and I talked to a UGA insider today. I referenced him a lot. A guy I consider to be a good friend of mine, Matt DeBerry. He's a senior analyst there at Dog Post, does a really good job. We share a lot of content back and forth. I talked to Matt for a while, and we were just having some general conversation, but obviously, the topic of discussion was Cade, and Georgia lost 4 starters on the offensive line, in the past 14 days or whatever. And Matt said, I say 4 because Cade was a starter. Yeah, he might not have started every single game, and he might not have, started at the same spot, but Cade Mays started a lot of different games in a lot of different places and played. He was the utility guy for that offensive line. You're getting a guy that comes out of a program that had, what I think Georgia was ranked, according to PFF, Georgia was ranked number 2 overall best offensive line in the country this past season. They had an exceptional year, and that's kind of been the MO. But you're getting a guy that's ready, that knows how to work, that's played at a winning program, and he's coming home with a chance to redeem himself. And if he can get immediately eligible, you're getting a plug-and-play guy right now that's going to make a huge impact on your offensive line, can play tackle or guard, and you just added so much more talent to your offensive line.
And I think one of the interesting things to talk about with Cade coming back is also you look across this line for Tennessee, and if Trey Smith decides to come back to Tennessee tomorrow,
absolutely,
Cade Mays is going to be in a battle to start because Jerome Carvin's not giving up that right guard spot without a fight. Carvin played very, very well the back half of the season. And that's not a slight to Cade Mays. Rather, I think that's a compliment to Jeremy Pruitt, to Will Friend, to what they've done recruiting, to the way they've built this team. When you look at the offensive line that Tennessee has got right now, the only guy that Jeremy Pruitt didn't recruit to Tennessee was Trey Smith, but everybody in the country wanted Trey Smith. Mm-hmm. But you're talking about Wanye Morris. You could potentially get Trey Smith back. Brandon Kennedy. Right guard looks like it's going to be probably Cade Mays, but I don't think Jerome Carvin's going to let that go without a fight. And then right tackle Wanye Morris. That's a quality offensive line. And I said this in our group thread today, Matt, and I want to talk about this just for a second. Everybody seems like every year, every couple of years, people want to ask, is Tennessee back? Is Tennessee back? Is Tennessee back? I don't know that Tennessee's back, but I will tell you that if Trey Smith stays, and Tennessee gets Cade Mays immediately eligible, which between Sam Pittman leaving, between the open lawsuit, between the fact that he's not just coming closer to home, he's coming back home, literally to his hometown.
It doesn't get any closer.
Yeah. The fact that he's doing all of those things, and that I think the Mays family will probably get an attorney involved with this rather than just go through the NCAA paperwork, I think they've got a really, really outstanding chance to get him eligible immediately. You're looking at an offensive line that is not just talented on the first line. Think about this.
Right.
Left tackle's Wanya Morris, 5-star, and freshman All-American. Left guard's Trey Smith. Trey Smith was a 5-star. He's been an All-American. He's been All-SEC. He's won everything you can win. At center, you've got Brandon Kennedy. He was a 4-star player. He's been on the Remington watch list. He's been honorable mention All-SEC. He's going to be on the Remington watch list again for the best center in the country next season. At right guard, we're going to go now with Cade Mays, a 5-star. We know all the accolades. We know how well he played at Georgia. Over at right tackle, you're looking at Darnell Wright, another 5-star, was a freshman All-American. Everybody knows those guys. This is why Tennessee might have a chance to be back next year and actually be really good. Go to the second line. Go to the backups. Go to the 2 deep. Left tackle's Jameer Johnson. When Jameer Johnson got here as a JUCO product, some sites had him as a 3-star, some had him as a 4-star. Jameer has put on weight. He's worked in the weight room. He's added good weight. He's worked on his technique. And now he's a guy that can help you at either tackle. He can help you at either guard. And has played a lot of quality snaps for this team and played well for Tennessee this season. Left guard, you'd probably be looking at Jerome Carvin. Carvin was a 4-star player out of Memphis. One of the better linemen in the state. Again, he's played very, very well for Tennessee down the stretch this year. He's had some really good games, and he's not going to give up a starting job that he probably feels like he's earned without a fight. That's a valuable player, and he can play anywhere on the line. Center, you're probably looking at Cooper Mays. Cooper's going to be another 4-star guy that you're adding in this class. Could come in and play center, and he's the one true freshman in this bunch. Go to right guard, I think you'd probably be looking at Jackson Lampley. Lampley was a 4-star interior offensive lineman last year out of MBA. They got to redshirt him this year. How long has it been since Tennessee redshirted a freshman offensive lineman?
That was a 4-star.
That was a 4-star that was that good.
Mm-hmm.
They redshirted him. And then right tackle Chris Akporohene, who also had 4-star grades from a lot of services, who I think was still underrated. He's big, he's strong, he's very long, he's a good athlete, he's got a nasty streak in the run game. You're talking about, and they got to redshirt him too. So you look down that offensive line, and you've got a 2 deep of 4 and 5 stars exclusively. Most of them have played for you or been with the program for a little while, and then you have other guys coming in. That's huge. If you want to see where Jeremy Pruitt and this staff has made a difference at the University of Tennessee, that 2 deep right there is it. That's the difference.
100%. And you talk about Tennessee being back, or at least back to competing and whatnot. You look at Tennessee's overall talent pool and what they're pulling in. We're just looking at the offensive line there and talking about the 4 and 5 stars there. That's not even taking into account what all Georgia's losing. You mentioned, Matt, how many offensive linemen they're losing. They have Cade Mays in the transfer portal. Brenton Cox just transferred from Georgia to Florida. That doesn't really help Tennessee a whole lot. It goes from one rival to another. But you have Robert Beal, who's a former Brenton Cox is a former 5-star who's now off of Georgia's roster. Robert Beal, former 4-star, is transferring. Otis Reese, former 4-star defensive back, transferring. That doesn't include losing DeAndre Swift to the NFL draft, Jake Fromm to the NFL draft. I mean, I don't know that you would say Georgia's in full-on rebuild mode where they're going to take a gigantic step back next year, but they should definitely be taking a step back next season, considering what all they're losing. And Florida's going to be interesting to see what they do. Tennessee, I think, didn't necessarily gain ground on Florida a whole lot, but they didn't really lose a whole lot of ground, in my opinion, on them when it comes to talent and everything in this recruiting cycle. And Tennessee still has a chance to add a few more pieces there as well. We'll get to that in a second. But the trenches, the SEC is a line of scrimmage league, and as we just kind of have detailed here in depth, Tennessee's offensive line, assuming they get Cade Mays in and assuming he can play immediately, and if Trey Smith does come back, I said this on the regular RTI podcast. I mean, I think that's in contention for the best offensive line in the SEC. And if you're the best offensive line in the SEC, you're probably the best offensive line in the country. Now, granted, they have the gel. You can't have any injuries, and you're still going to be relying on two young guys and Darnell and Wanye who'll be true sophomores. But that's just a lot of pure talent, a lot of really good players, and a lot of really high ceilings that you're going to have. Jim Chaney and Will Friend, who are both highly thought of as offensive line coaches. So it's going to be worth watching and seeing when this gets finalized. If I assume it will, but then whether or not he will have immediate eligibility or not. But guys, we got a lot to cover, so we move on to the next topic here, and that is news on Jay Hardy. You guys just put out some information on Jay Hardy on VR2.site. If you're all listening to this, go check it out. It's VR2.site is where you can find all of their work. Brandon and Matt and all the entire VR2 team. But Matt, I'll turn it over to you because I think you're the one who wrote the article. I know Brandon, you wrote one about Miles Jones, who we'll talk about here in a second. But Matt, what is the latest on Jay Hardy and Tennessee's recruitment of him?
So Jay Hardy, I wrote the interview on Jay Hardy. Dale Dowden went down and interviewed him last night. With Jay, everybody needed to see Tennessee push this one late into the recruiting cycle. February, he didn't sign, obviously, so that's big. It is just a Tennessee and Auburn battle. Georgia, Alabama, and Ole Miss were all programs that have been in contact the last couple of weeks, but Jay told them that, it's Tennessee and Auburn, and that's who he's going to focus on. Plans to get back to campus in Knoxville within the next couple of weeks. Has been trying to set that up, but he plays at McCallie, which, I've said this before, is a premier school, and they've been all over the country playing basketball, and they were in Florida in the middle of December. He just hasn't been able to make it work yet, but when the dead period ends, it sounds like he is going to get up there. Also sounds like he's going to let Tennessee come in home with him, which is big. Sitting down again with his parents and him, and that's where relationships are really built. So much can be done on an unofficial visit. An official visit goes a long ways, but those in-home visits where you're sitting there with your parents and your family around in your natural environment, that's where kids, that's where you're able to win kids over. It's where Tennessee was able to really pull ahead with Morven Joseph and hold on to the lead. So that's going to be big for Tennessee if they can get in home with Jay. Seems like they have a really good chance. Planning to make his mind up in the next 2 to 3 weeks and shut things down. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Need to see him get to campus. Need to see Tennessee get in home. But it does sound like Tennessee has some momentum right now. The biggest thing for Jay is, the in-state guys that are making a strong push for him. It was really big to see Tennessee finish the season strong, win a bowl, and then all of those guys that have signed already in-state, Keyshawn, Cooper, Tyler, and Omari have worked relentlessly on him. So there's a lot going in Tennessee's favor right now. He definitely has more relationships at Tennessee, but the thing he's looking for is a better relationship with the coaches. So, I don't think that's going to be too hard for the Vols to overcome. But, Auburn done a really good job in this recruitment. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I got the feeling from you said the interview you did with Dale and your write-up on it that relationships are the most important thing. And we've talked about that here before on this podcast about that was why we all thought he chose Auburn when he did, is because of the stronger relationships he had with the Tigers coaching staff than he did at Tennessee. And like you said, I think he has more relationships with Tennessee, but I think it's just stronger with Auburn. And it's going to be, can Tennessee convince him and show him enough love that, hey, we care about you just as much as Auburn. We care about you more than Auburn or whatever. I think that's going to be the key is getting him to realize or convincing him and maybe getting him to believe, if he doesn't believe, that Tennessee's coaches care just as much about him as Auburn's coaches do. And that's going to be, that's, I guess technically Trey Smith was priority number one for Tennessee in this recruiting cycle right now and trying to get him to come back. But priority number one of the actual recruits in the 2020 class is Jay Hardy. And then obviously, we have D. Beckwith, there's Dakari Caldwell, and a few other guys that we could mention. We'll mention one of them here in a minute, and Broderick Jones. But it's no doubt to me Jay Hardy is number one on Tennessee's board right now, and that's going to be interesting to watch here in a couple weeks. Like you said, he's used his official visits, so that getting him unofficial and going at home is going to be huge because this is where geography pays off for Tennessee, because that's just an hour and a half, if that much, drive from where he is to go to UT's campus. So it's a lot easier for him to go on unofficial to see UT rather than go on unofficial to go see Auburn. So that's where the geography and as you mentioned, Matt, being in state can really pay off for Tennessee. Brandon, I want to go over to you because Tennessee, talking about Cade Mays transferring in, Tennessee earlier today, that was the first piece of kind of big news that broke, was that y'all had this first too, by the way, so credit to you guys. Tennessee added Miles Jones, a wide receiver from Nebraska. It looks like he's going to be a walk-on. Looks like he's going to apply for an immediate eligibility waiver, but I don't know that the NCAA will grant it to him. Granted, he is moving closer to home. Nebraska is a lot further away from Fort Lauderdale, Florida than Knoxville, so he is moving quite a bit closer to home. And Tennessee and Nebraska don't play each other on the schedule. They're not slated to, unless it's unless it's a bowl game anytime in the near future. But Brandon, what are your thoughts on what kind of impact he can bring, and do you think he gets eligible? I would just be pretty surprised if he's eligible. But I also think it's a pretty good job for Tennessee to get him in as a walk-on, a guy who is a scholarship player at another Power 5 school to come out as a walk-on. That's the same thing they did with Kasim Hill. That's pretty impressive.
That's what's the most impressive to me about the entire situation.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things about Miles Jones is, of course, Tennessee needs receivers. We've talked about that at length on this podcast. It looks like they may go get D. Beckwith. Now, we don't know if D. Beckwith's going to be a tight end. He's going to be a wide receiver. I think Tennessee likes their chances there. But now, besides that, right now, I don't know that Tennessee has a lot of receivers they feel like they're in a great spot with. Receiver was a place we thought they might go to the transfer portal. They went to get Jones, and he is the same kind of receiver that Tennessee has been recruiting this class. He's 5'9", about 180 pounds. Tennessee is looking for smaller receivers. He is smaller. He's from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What is he, boys? If he's an athlete from Florida, he's fast.
Yeah.
I think he is probably considerably faster than the time that you see listed on some of his recruiting profiles. He looks faster than that on tape. This is a kid that this is not just a scholarship kid that Tennessee is getting to come be a walk-on. Rivals had this guy as a 4-star when he came out. This is a good player. This is a quality athlete that Tennessee's bringing in. He fits the mold at receiver they're wanting. I don't know that he'll be eligible immediately or not. He's coming closer to home. I think one of the things that could help him in his case is he has missed the last 2 years. His first year, his true freshman season, he played in one game. He had a bad injury. It ended the rest of his season. He didn't play again that year. This season, he did play in 4 games, but he only played in 4 games, so he was eligible to redshirt. So he'll arrive at Tennessee as a redshirt sophomore with a decent chance of being able to apply for a 6th year of eligibility if he would want it, because he should be able to get a medical redshirt for that freshman season. So you're talking about a guy that Tennessee's looking at going, we can develop this guy, we can grow him, we can get him into our offense. He fits kind of where we're wanting to go, what we're wanting to do. He's a quality player and a quality athlete. Coming out of high school, he had offers from Georgia, Vanderbilt, Nebraska. There were a few other Power 5 schools that had South Carolina had offered him.
Mississippi State.
So, I mean, he didn't just have some Power 5 offers. He had SEC offers. This is a kid you feel like you could develop. You could potentially have for 4 years. You could have a 4-year cycle with this young man because he has got a good chance of being eligible for a 6th year if he wants to go that way. So I think that's one of the reasons you see Tennessee go for him. They're getting him to walk on. It's impressive you convince him to do that, because he could have gone to some other places and played right away. Or maybe not played right away, but he could have gone other places and been on scholarship. And I think if things pan out at Tennessee, he'll be on scholarship here before it's over with. One thing to watch is what kind of player is he after the injury. And I think he's going to have to prove himself on that and show what he can do. This past season, he had some trouble at times. It looked like recovering. Looks like he wasn't all the way back, but how many times have we seen that from an athlete where you just need another year? If this young man goes back to what he did on tape in high school, Tennessee just got a really good player who's going to be a factor in their receiver room, especially if he gets eligible, he'll factor in this year. If he doesn't get eligible, he'll factor in next year. This is a quality player Tennessee got. Could also make some noise on kickoff returns. He's a good return man. He's listed as a wide receiver. He played running back some in high school. Nebraska looked at him a little bit as a running back. He was an athlete coming out, so he brings that ability to break tackles out on the edge despite his smaller size. He's more physical than you expect from a wide receiver his size. He's going to break some tackles, then has the speed to hurt you. So this is a sneaky good get by Tennessee, especially getting him as a walk-on. Getting a kid who was a 4-star, 247 had him as a high 3-star. Rivals had him as a 4-star. Getting a kid that caliber out of a powerhouse program in Florida from another Power 5 program in Nebraska to walk onto your program that doesn't happen.
I think, to me, I've heard kind of the biggest complaint about him, and you mentioned there is his size, about 5'8", 180 pounds. But I compared him on the RTI podcast to Pig Howard at Tennessee, years ago, back in 2013 and 14, who he was a good athlete. He wasn't going to be, he's not going to be the star of the team. He's not going to be the guy that's going to lead you into a 1,000-yard season in receiving or have 1,000 yards rushing. But he's going to be a guy that I think. I think the ceiling for Jones, as long as you said, Brandon, like you said, if he's recovered enough from his injury, I think the ceiling for him is being utilized like a Pig Howard, a guy you can put in and give a couple carries to in a game, throw the ball to on screens and do different stuff. And as you said, he can be a factor on special teams. He in high school down in Fort Lauderdale, at his high school, that I just forgot the name now, but it was coached by former NFL All-Pro defensive back Patrick Surtain. It's not a bad school down there at all. He's coming from American Heritage. That's where it is. He led in his senior season. I think they were 14-0 and undefeated his senior season as well. But he led the team in kick return and punt return yards and all-purpose yards. He had about 700 rushing yards, 400 receiving yards, 14 total offensive touchdowns, and he had 2 kick returns for touchdowns. I mean, that's a guy to me that you can just use all over the field. And Tennessee's gotten a couple of those guys in recruiting lately. You look at Jimmy Holiday, you can kind of use him at multiple different spots, and that's why it makes him so intriguing, is that he's just such a dynamic athlete that you can kind of use him anywhere in offense. You look at Jimmy Callaway, he's a guy you can kind of put at multiple spots on offense. You look on defensively, we talked about Danico Slaughter, talked about Morven Joseph, can play a lot of positions, even Keyshawn Lawrence. I think this staff is prioritizing more than the previous staff especially, but I think more than we've seen in a while. I think this staff is really prioritizing position versatility and guys who have good football IQ. And I think if you're that good where you can do a bunch of returns and be used on offense the way he was, it doesn't take the same kind of same type of football IQ as it does other positions. But that to me expresses that he has good football IQ. And to me, it's going to be whether or not he's recovered enough from his injury and what kind of prospects Tennessee brings in between now and 2021, because like you said, I don't think he'll get eligible. I think he'll make a case for it, but I don't think he will for next season. But you're going to lose, obviously this year you're losing Jennings, Callaway, and Tyler Bird. Next season you're going to lose Josh Palmer and I'm just forgetting his name, Brandon Johnson. And then you're going to have Cedric Tillman will be a senior. Romel Keaton will be a junior at that point, I think. And if he progresses the way that people think he could, I mean, you could be looking at him potentially leaving early after the 2021 season. So I think he's got a chance to make an impact in 2021 when he's probably going to be eligible. But I'm not too concerned about his size. It's not SEC size, but you're also not going to be counting on him to be your number one receiver. He's going to be a guy who could be playing in the slot. And you have other guys out wide who are bigger than him. To be bigger guys out there. So I personally don't think the size thing is that big of a deal, but I'm curious your thoughts on that, Brandon.
He plays bigger than his size too. This is it's interesting you make the Pig Howard comparison, because like Pig, he's not afraid of a bigger defender. He's not afraid to stick his nose in there. He's not afraid to block. He's not a big guy, but now he's scrappy. I think where you're going to see teams really have a difficult time with Jones, and where I think Jim Chaney will utilize him well, is in the slot, when you can back him 2 yards off the line of scrimmage and get him that free release. He's fast, but he's quicker than he is fast. He's scrappy. He's going to fight through. If you try to push this guy off, if you try to get your hands on him, he's scrappy and physical enough to fight through it. It doesn't bother him that much. So he's going to get some free releases. He's going to work through. If you don't hit him square up and just are bigger than him and physically stop him, if you don't get a solid hit on him, he's scrappy enough, physically tough enough to fight through that. And then he's got the speed to hurt you. I mean, this kid's fast. Is he Jalen Hyatt fast? No, he's not. He's not Hyatt. He's not Callaway, but he's fast. If you let him get in the open field, he's going to score. This is not a kid you want to let get behind your safeties. I think he's a valuable piece for Tennessee. I really do, and I think if he gets healthy and if you develop him with the amount of time that he could potentially be eligible, you're talking about this is a young man that Tennessee right now could see as a. You can almost see him like a standard recruit, because you have a chance to have a 4-year window with him. Even if he has to sit out a year, then you've got 3 years. But you could have him on the roster for 4 years. I think that's big too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that the time you're going to have him, the amount of time you're going to have him, is also big as well for Tennessee. Matt, I'm going to throw this over to you. We're going to change subjects here and talk about a guy I teased earlier. Talk about Auburn's offensive line coach, which may seem weird at first, but there's a reason. J.B. Grimes, the Auburn's offensive line coach, has stepped down from his position, no longer on staff. Why we're talking about this is because that could affect Tennessee recruiting-wise, because Roderick Jones, 5-star Georgia commit, who's talked about he was kind of 50-50 on Georgia and Auburn, and he's going to come visit Tennessee. I'm curious in your opinion on this, Matt, because I know you've talked to some people, I'm sure, about it. How big of an impact could this have on Jones? Does this maybe, I wouldn't say eliminate Auburn, but does this really knock Auburn and maybe put Tennessee up higher, or is it just does this really kind of solidify Georgia more for him? I'm just curious how this move could potentially affect Tennessee's recruiting.
You have to think with the news of Cade today and the news of Grimes yesterday, I believe it was, that this really solidifies Georgia more. I've kind of always felt that it was going to be Georgia. The real key was, and you're right, I have talked to more than one person about this. I talked to Matt for a little bit about it today, and talked to another guy I know around the Georgia program. And the deal is Matt Luke hasn't got to go in home with Jones yet. He wasn't able to make it that first week, but he had other guys that he needed to go see. Now Kirby's going to be able to slide in home and see him, or was able to slide in home and see him. Matt Luke will get to have his chance. They'll get to have him back down for another visit more than likely. The deal was Matt Luke had to go see other players that were going to, make a decision during the early signing period. Jones, it's kind of just going to be how he meshes with him, but right now it seems like everything is going well behind the scenes. The face-to-face, who knows what will happen. We talked a little bit in our premium notebook today that we released. According to one of the sources I talked to around the Georgia program, Luke and Cade had a face-to-face, and it didn't go as well as some may have expected, as far as what position he might play moving forward and everything like that. So how is Matt Luke's offensive line now? Now, granted, I think anybody in the country wants Roderick Jones, but these guys that are coming in for Georgia, they were Sam Pittman's guys. Now, Matt Luke's a heck of an offensive line coach, but there's still going to be a lot to hash out. I'm not saying that recruitment's up in the air, but I think that the comfort level being committed to Georgia for well over a year now is going to play a big factor in this one. I don't think Tennessee can swing enough momentum with one visit to land him. Unfortunately, the departure of Grimes may just make it to where Tennessee finishes second. That's just my opinion on it, but one official visit can change anything. One official visit to Auburn was enough to make Tennessee finish second for Jay Hardy in a race that they should have easily won. And this is a race that Georgia should win. So
it'd be nice to return that favor.
Yeah, who knows what can happen. So Tennessee still got a shot at Georgia. They still got a shot at Jones, as do the other programs. So, or a shot at Hardy and a shot at Jones. So we'll see what happens. But right now, I think Grimes leaving, coupled with the departure of Cade Mays, the speculation that he could get eligible immediately, I think that it probably points to solidifying Jones to Georgia, and that's the way that most people feel right now.
And I think it's fair, and I 100% understand it too. As you just lay it out there, that I think that he would see he would see an opening for immediate playing time at Georgia, whereas I don't know that he sees it as much at Auburn, and especially at Tennessee right now. There's not really going to be immediate playing time. You got to figure, if Trey Smith comes back, obviously he'll be gone after next season regardless, but you still have next season with Wanya and Darnell. What if they decide to come back for the senior seasons? Cade Mays will be here probably 2 years, I'd say. The center position is going to open up, but you have guys recruited at Cooper Mays and Javonte Spraggins this recruiting cycle at center. So Tennessee's offensive line, the depth there could be. Looking at that position when Pruitt first inherited it and when Pruitt first got hired on and what it could be in his third season, that talk about a complete 180 from what it was when he first got here to what it could be now. That's impressive to me.
Well, one of the things that you said there is we're talking about a consensus 5-star offensive tackle that may be looking at another school because he doesn't see immediate playing time at Tennessee. How long has it been since we've said that?
Yeah.
You're not just talking about a good offensive lineman. You're talking about one of the elite offensive tackles in the country. Now, if you're Tennessee, I think the pitch that you make to him is possibly that going forward, if Trey comes back, there's probably not a spot for you this year. But if Trey leaves, maybe you talk about, well, we would like to maybe move Darnell right inside and put you at tackle. Mm-hmm. If Trey comes back, you tell him maybe that for next year. But to be in a position as Tennessee to be able to go, if we landed this 5-star elite, everybody in the nation wants him offensive tackle, we could redshirt him. That's insane.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the last time Tennessee's had luxury at any position to redshirt, a top. They didn't have the luxury of registering J.J. Peterson. They kind of had to. But aside from him, over the last, 5-10 years, I can't think of a high, top 100, top 50 player that Tennessee's recruited that they've actually been able to redshirt, or that they've, other than injury or like I said, the extenuating circumstances with J.J. Peterson. Of course, now it helps you have that 4-game redshirt rule, which you didn't have years ago. But you look at what Georgia, Alabama, Florida, they have guys, highly rated players that they can redshirt, that they can sit on the bench. And, look at that graphic that Alabama tweeted out a long time ago of those 4 running backs on the roster who are now all in the NFL with Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, all in the same roster at the same time. And it's just like, that's insane to think about. But that's the kind of depth that Alabama's had for years now. It's the kind of depth that Georgia was trying to build. It's the kind of depth that Florida's trying to build, and Clemson has right now too. So it's been a while that I can think of where Tennessee's been able to actually legitimately have a chance to redshirt, and this, that's assuming they would get the Roderick Jones. I don't think they do, but you look at Tennessee's roster now and some guys that they've recruited in this current cycle. We talked about it before in previous podcasts of how many immediate starters we think Tennessee has in the 2020 class. We all kind of pegged Keyshawn Lawrence as the most likely guy, but Harrison Bailey, I think there's a he's going to compete for the starting job, and we'll see if he gets it or not at the quarterback. But other than those two, there aren't a ton of guys you look at who Tennessee's bringing in as top 200 players that are going to be immediately, unless there's injury, they're probably going to be immediate starters. Now, Amari Thomas, I think, could push for some playing time, but I don't think he's going to be an immediate starter. I don't know if you're redshirting him, but that's or Dominic Bailey at the same time. I think you could redshirt him. So it's interesting to see how things have changed quickly, and Tennessee's still not where they need to be. They're still not where they need to be depth-wise overall and talent-wise overall. But we're starting to see signs that they're getting there, and it's nice to see. Now, we've seen signs like this before with, I know it was granted a little more paper recruiting than what I think actual skill recruiting with Butch Jones. So we've seen it before. Now it's got to pan out on the field, and hopefully for Tennessee fans, and hopefully for us who cover Tennessee, it will happen this time, and it won't be a paper tiger. But guys, I think that'll be a good place to wrap up this podcast. Matt, I'll turn it over to you to let you plug what's happening on VR2.site. I saw as right before we hit record for this podcast, you posted the latest insider notes for VR2, and you guys have a ton of stuff going on. Notice you have your series of the 21 players to watch in the 2021 class. So what do you guys have on the site right now, and what do you guys have coming up?
Yeah, so just posted Insider Notebook there. Actually did it a little different this time because been very pressed for time today, obviously. I procrastinated a little bit, like we talked about before we got started. Woke up this morning a little groggy, thought, oh, yeah, it's a Wednesday. Not a big deal. Already had, a couple of articles ready to go and didn't even run them today. We'll run them tomorrow, barring some other major news. Obviously, we're expecting, the Trey Smith news and all that. But, the Insider Notebook this time's a little different. Did it in a video format, so I could just, go, and ended up taking forever to upload it to YouTube. So probably won't do that again. But, yeah, it's there to check out if you haven't signed up already, $3 a month. And we're doing the 21 offensive and 21 defensive recruits, and that's a lot number considering that Tennessee's already offered around 220-something players in the 21 class. But, it's pretty safe to key in on about 45 guys generally. That number is going to change drastically between now and this time next year, obviously. But so we got that coming out, and we're going to be doing some newcomer profiles. We saw most of these guys in person this time around, so we'll have all of that, and we're going to be hitting the road for some other stuff pretty soon. Not ready to release any details on it just yet, but we've got a lot coming up. Looking at a lot of different coverage here, so we'll have some pretty exciting stuff. Again, you can check us out at VR2.site, Twitter at _VR2_, and Facebook at VR2, and Instagram at VR2.
That sounds awesome. I mentioned this on the RTI podcast. I'll mention on here too. We'll have live coverage of Trey Smith and Jerry Pruitt at their press conference tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern, or if you're listening to this on Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern on Tennessee's campus. We'll have live coverage of that for you there. Either we haven't decided yet if we're doing Periscope or just record the video and then post it to YouTube, but we'll be there regardless and have tweets and stuff of their quotes from it. So we'll be there. If we don't have live video, we'll at least have recorded video for you guys later, but I'm thinking we might go live. But we'll be live there for whatever Trey Smith announces on Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern. And we'll, of course, have our continued basketball coverage. Baseball's coming up, so we got coverage about that as well. So all kinds of stuff happening with Tennessee athletics, Tennessee football, basketball, recruiting, baseball, and now recruiting's, starting to amp up more because we're into the time where guys can come visit and everything too. So we're getting more recruiting news, and obviously you guys will have a lot on that, but we'll do our coverage of that as well. But guys, thank you all so much for tuning in to the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. You can find them at VR2.site, and they are VR2 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're RockyTopInsider.com. You can find us at RockyTopInsider on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as well. Thank you all for listening, and signing off for Matt and Brandon, I am Nathaniel, and we'll be back again a little later on with another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast.